It was nearly midnight, and the office floor was quiet, too quiet, just the buzz of the city below, the soft hum of overhead lights, and the rhythmic swish of a mop across polished marble. Then suddenly, her voice, low, unsure, yet piercing through the silence like glass breaking in a still room. "Do you think we could start right here?" It wasn't a line, not something romantic or playful. It was something else. A question heavy with meaning, spoken by a woman who never asked questions. She was sitting alone in her corner office, backlit by the city skyline, a crimson dress hugging her frame, one leg stretched out, her stiletto heel resting squarely on the mop held by a man who rarely spoke. The moment froze. He looked at her, not with fear or surprise, but with something deeper. I remember standing just beyond the glass wall, pretending to check the thermostat, and watching that moment unfold. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't dramatic, but it felt like a door creaking open in a world built on locked ones. I'd worked in that building 20 years, and I'd never seen anything like it. Not the gesture, not the question, but the stillness, the gravity, and the quiet honesty of it all. This wasn't some office fling. This was something different, and the story behind it, well, it's stayed with me all these years. Because once you see a moment like that, you start to look at people a little differently. You start to realize how much goes unseen, unspoken, unnoticed. It started quietly, like most things that matter. Two people, living completely different lives, orbiting the same space but never truly meeting. One of them was Marcus Dean, tall, quiet, steady. Every evening around 10:30, he arrived wearing the same blue uniform, rolled his cart into the hallway, and began his nightly routine. You could set your watch by him. He barely spoke to anyone, just nodded politely, cleaned thoroughly, and disappeared before dawn. No one asked where he came from or what he thought. That's how people treat janitors in places like this, like part of the furniture. The other was Claire Benton. Everyone knew her name. Senior VP Ruthless Negotiator. Immovable. She worked later than anyone, always perched at her glass desk, lit by her designer lamp, reviewing reports with a focus that made interns tremble. People admired her, or feared her, but no one knew her. She never laughed in the break room, never went to office parties, just her laptop, and a reputation for perfection. The only thing these two had in common was that they were always the last to leave. The rest of us saw them as opposites. Opposite skin color, opposite income, opposite worlds. But that's the thing about proximity. When people share space long enough, something eventually stirs. Even if no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. At first it was nothing, just routine. Marcus would enter the office quietly, nod in Claire's direction, and begin his work. She never looked up. She didn't need to. She was used to being invisible to others, and perhaps assumed she was invisible to him too. But Marcus saw things others didn't. He noticed the empty coffee cups piling up slower each night, the way she sometimes stared out the window long after closing her laptop, and the way her heels were always kicked off beneath the desk by midnight. She was breaking down, and she didn't know anyone could tell. Claire on her end started to notice something about Marcus too. The way he mopped the floor in smooth, symmetrical strokes. The way he always placed the chairs back with care. The way his eyes scanned the office like he was doing more than just cleaning, like he was thinking. She began timing her break around when he'd pass by, just sipping water as he moved through the room, silently. Eventually, their nods became small greetings. "Evening. Ma'am." And then one night she asked, "Ever get tired of cleaning up after everyone else?" He paused, turned to her and said, "I'm not cleaning up after people. I'm making sure no one slips." That answer, it stopped her cold. There was something behind it, something bigger. And that's when the silence between them changed. It was no longer emptiness. It was anticipation. It was only after several more nights of passing words that Claire began to realize Marcus wasn't just smart. He was sharp, observant, measured. He asked her once, "How do you make time go faster when it's moving slow?" She said she buried herself in work. He said he used to build things. That caught her attention. "Build what?" "Systems," he said. I was an engineer, until I wasn't. That wasn't held weight, but he didn't elaborate, not then. It wasn't until weeks later, over black coffee she left out for him without a word, that he told her the full story. Marcus had once worked for a firm contracted by the city, designed a water pressure regulation system that flagged leaks in high-rise buildings. He found out his company was manipulating the data to avoid repairs. People were getting sick. He blew the whistle. They made sure he couldn't work in engineering again. That was years ago. Since then, he kept to himself, cleaned offices, read books, listened to people. Claire listened, really listened. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like the most powerful person in the room. She felt like someone who hadn't seen the world clearly, not until now. It would be easy to say Claire changed overnight. She didn't. But she began showing up later, staying longer, not because of work, but because of Marcus. She brought him leftover pastries from meetings, asked his opinion on things that had nothing to do with janitorial work. And once, just once, she cried, quietly, after a call with her mother. She didn't expect Marcus to be nearby, but he was, and he didn't ask questions. He just sat down, 10 feet away, and waited until she wiped her face and stood tall again. That's when she began to unravel. She told him about the pressure, the politics, the loneliness of being at the top when everyone below either resents you or wants your job. She told him about her divorce, about her father, who died thinking she was still chasing a dream he never believed she could catch. Marcus didn't interrupt. He just listened, nodding slowly. Claire found comfort in his stillness. In a world of shouting, Marcus's silence was something sacred. They never spoke about anything romantic, not once. But the energy between them grew, not flirtation, something deeper, something built on mutual recognition. That night, the one I mentioned, the one where she asked the question, something felt different from the moment Marcus walked in. Claire was already seated, her shoes off, one leg crossed over the other. She wasn't looking at spreadsheets. She was looking at him. He moved toward the desk, mop in hand, not sure what to expect. She didn't speak at first, just watched him. Then, without breaking her gaze, she extended her leg and rested her heel on the mop. He stopped, not startled, just still. That's when she said it. "Do you think we could start right here?" It wasn't said with a smirk or a wink. It was almost whispered, a question carrying the weight of something much bigger than the room they were in. Time stretched. The mop didn't move. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time, he let down a layer of guardedness. "Start what?" he asked. She hesitated. "Seeing each other, as we are, without the uniforms, without the job titles." He didn't smile. He didn't retreat. He just nodded once, gently, like the question wasn't absurd at all, like it had been waiting for the right time to be asked. And in that silence, something profound passed between them. It took me a long time to understand what she meant that night, and even longer to realize what Marcus heard in her words. She wasn't asking for a relationship, not in the way most people mean it. She was asking for truth, for connection, for a way out of the coldness that surrounded her every day. She was asking, could this be the place we drop our guard? Could this be the moment we choose something real? Marcus didn't answer with a grand gesture. He didn't toss the mop aside or step into the role of some romantic lead. He just looked at her with eyes that saw everything and said, "Yeah, we could." That was all. And yet it changed everything. From that night forward, their interactions had a different air. Not secretive, not scandalous, just human. Two people who had stepped out of their roles and into something honest. Over the weeks that followed, Claire began to leave out 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. Sometimes Marcus would bring her articles clipped from old magazines. She once left a note on his cart, "I'm learning more from you than from my mentors." There was never anything physical, but there was trust. There was conversation. There was recognition. And for 2 people who'd spent most of their lives feeling unseen in different ways, that was everything. Others began to notice something had shifted. Not just in Claire, but in the entire energy of the office. She was more present, kinder even. She didn't tolerate disrespect toward janitorial staff. More than once, she interrupted meetings to point out the work Marcus and his team did. When someone rolled their eyes, she said, "You'd notice real quick if they stopped doing it." People started paying attention. Of course, word got around. One night, a junior analyst stayed late and saw them talking. Claire leaning on her desk, Marcus sipping coffee, laughing quietly. By morning, the rumor mill was churning. HR called Claire in. The concern was tone deaf. "Just want to make sure boundaries are clear." Claire didn't raise her voice. She just said, "Are you asking if I'm treating someone with respect?" They dropped it, because there was nothing to find. No rules broken, no protocols violated, just a powerful woman refusing to act like she was above someone whose hands carried more dignity than most of the boardroom. And that perhaps was what made people uncomfortable. Not what she did, but who she chose to see. I tell this story because I watched it unfold from a distance. Me, the building maintenance supervisor, the guy nobody thinks notices anything. But I did. I saw the quiet shift in her shoulders. The light returned to his eyes and the space between them that grew smaller night after night. We don't talk enough about the people who hold buildings together, or the ones who carry their own weight while climbing ladders others take for granted. Claire and Marcus taught me something important. Not all love stories are loud. Some begin with a mop, a red dress, and a single question whispered into the silence. That night, when she asked if they could start right there, she wasn't just asking Marcus. She was asking herself, and maybe in some way, asking all of us. Could we start seeing people as more than their job titles? Could we start listening before judging? Could we start right here? I don't know where they are now, but I know what I saw, and I know it was real.